Hey everybody, it's Justin and welcome back to the BTR Garage. Today we have a quick video where I'm going to show you how to properly assemble your MCS suspension or most other suspension kits as well when you're using the Vorschlag rear suspension top mounts. Now back when I did the MCS suspension install originally on my 2017 BRZ, I used the OEM top hats or spring perches, which I'll show you in a little bit, to actually keep the spring in place on the rear shocks. Now while this particular configuration worked okay and had no issues with it over a year of racing, it is not the exact proper way to assemble the rear suspension. So it was brought to my attention just recently the correct way to do it, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. So I've got the correct parts to put the rear suspension together the way it is supposed to be. We're going to take it apart, show you the way I did it before, and then we'll show you the proper way to assemble it. All right, so we have the rear shock out of the car and I haven't disassembled it yet. So this is how I put it together originally with the MCS suspension and these Vorschlag rear shock mounts. Now you'll notice the little black piece up here, that is the OEM spring perch or spring hat, and it looks like this guy right here. And basically what I did is I used this as the spring alignment piece that sits on the top of the spring, and on the Vorschlag top mount there's a ridge around the outside that fits into this hole just perfectly, which keeps this thing from moving around while it's on the shock mount there. Now like I said, while that worked just fine, the proper piece to use is actually this silver spring perch or spring top hat, which comes with your MCS suspension kit. Now the reason why I didn't use this thing to begin with is I did not have the correct step bushing that goes on the shock shaft. That step bushing is required because this little hole right here in the spring hat is too big for the threaded shock shaft up here. So what this thing would do was it would slide around on the shock shaft and not keep the spring centered. So I called up MCS just recently and they hooked me up with the correct step bushing, which is this little guy here. And what this little bushing does is it basically fits into your spring hat like that. And then that hole there is actually the correct size for the threaded shock shaft. So when that is on the shock shaft, it stays solid and in place and doesn't jiggle around side to side and keeps that spring in its place. So with the original configuration, I had to improvise a little bit. I just didn't know any better. I got a bunch of different bushings and step bushings that came with the MCS kit, and I made do with what I had. And again, that worked okay, but we're gonna get this thing taken apart, show you the proper way to assemble it using the right silver spring hats and the proper step bushing. Now with the shock taken apart, we'll look a little bit closer at the Vorschlag rear shock mount. So this is the underside of it where the spring will seat up against, and here's that OEM part that I used that has the hole and the ridge for the spring itself. And you can see the ridge on the Vorschlag top mount here fits that just right. So that's what keeps that particular piece in place from going side to side and moving around, and then your spring just goes right over it like so. Now when we use the correct parts, this silver spring perch and then our little step bushing, the fitment is a little bit different. What we do is we take this little step bushing right here, and then that slides down onto our MCS shock shaft and just sits in there like that. Our spring perch then goes over the top of it. Obviously we're gonna have our spring on there first. And then what happens is we take the little bushing that comes with our Vorschlag kit, slide that over the shock shaft, and then last goes our Vorschlag top mount, which goes in like that. So that finished product looks like this. All right, now with all the correct pieces, we'll go ahead and put things back together. We have our little helper spring, we'll slide on. The guide for the mainspring and then the mainspring. And we'll throw our little step bushing on there. And this can be a little bit tricky, compressing the spring while we're trying to get all these parts to go together. And the step bushing for the top mounts itself. If we get lucky, I'll be able to hold this all in place and put thread lock on the top of the threads without it blowing up in my face. And then the last little step bushing, and then my nut. And there we go. Got the nut tightened up a little bit so it'll hold everything together. And this is what our finished product should look like with the silver spring perch, the step bushing, and then the Vorschlag top mount. Now we'll just tighten down the nut on the top. MCS says just to get it snug and then give it a whack with your hand. And that's all you need to do to get that top nut tightened down. So now we have the shock configured properly. We'll put it back in the car and then we should be good to go. So there we go, everybody, the correct way to assemble your MCS suspension or any other similar style of coilover system when you're using the Vorschlag rear top mount. So we had our helper spring, our mainspring, and again for the MCS, that specific little step bushing which allowed us to center our silver spring perch onto the shock shaft. This gold step bushing right here, that comes with the Vorschlag top mount, the Vorschlag top mount itself, and then the top mount has another gold bushing on the top here, which again centers that bearing onto the threaded shock shaft, and then lastly our nut on the threaded shock shaft. So we're gonna wrap this one up. I'm gonna throw the car back together. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. Hopefully this helped you guys out, and I look forward to getting more stuff out your way here in the near future. Stay fast out there. I am checking out, and we'll talk to you all next time.